Okay, next we move on to input validation. Let's take a look and see what does that mean. When we read input from the user, we need to do some validation to make sure they enter the right input. So lots of different types of input validation that we could do. When program reads bad data in, we get bad data out, right? If the user doesn't enter good input, garbage in, garbage out. So make sure we write programs that actually test and check to make sure that the user has entered good data. Here are some examples of types of errors. So you ask the user to enter yes or no, and they enter cat. That's a problem. Or when you are asking for numbers, they enter unreasonable values like greater than 100 or 120 for age, or negative number for age is not good either. Or simply the wrong data type. Maybe they enter a letter when you ask for a number, something like that. Or if they don't enter anything at all. So what can we do for these kind of things? So let's first look at string validation, which is like the yes or no, right? Okay, so here's a question. Do you like coding? Yes or no? Now, if the response is yes, then it's good. If they say anything else, then we say, oh no, right? So that is string validation. How do we validate the string? Here's another way to look at it. If response dot lower, what if they type in uppercase and you're looking for lowercase, or you're typing lowercase? So the lower function will take whatever the user enters and convert it all to lowercase. And you have to have the parenthesis because it's a function. Don't forget that. So if they type in YES with a capital Y, capital E, no matter what, it'll take every single letter, convert it into lowercase, and then compare. So we are good with any one of these answers. Okay, that's what that does. Now, if we stick the whole thing in a loop, right, we stay in the loop until the user actually enters good input. So you get input, check if it's valid, or check if it's invalid. If it's invalid, we go display an error message, get the input again, and stay in there until the user enters good input. So here's some code that I have. We'll take a look at it. It has several different types of validation. Let's take a look at the string validation, right? Response, here we go. Do you like coding? Yes or no? So here we go. While response dot lower not equal to yes and response dot lower. That means if it is neither yes nor no, right? Neither nor means is an and. Then you say invalid response and you get it again from the user. Okay. So as long as the user enters invalid response, something that is cat, dog, whatever is not yes or no, then it's going to stay in this loop. The minute they enter a good value, it's going to come out. And then we check, right? It could be yes or it could be no. So we check. If it is yes, we say yay. If it is not, then we say, oh no. So you can type in something else here too. This could be, if the response is yes, then maybe we write a whole bunch of other lines of code in there. We want to do other things. Else we quit. So different things that you can do, right? So that is string validation and a loop that goes with it. That's what we saw. Now let's take a look at unreasonable input validation. What is reasonable and what is not reasonable? So if they enter an age that is not within the range, right? So you enter a number, you enter a certain number, then we check to see. So go back to the code and here, forget all the other things. We read age and here's where I check if it is reasonable or not. It's part of a loop that checks to see if it's a number. But if age less than 0 or age greater than 100, then you say invalid, enter a reasonable age, right? And then the rest of the syntax checks for, what are we checking for here? Try except. Try except is to make sure that they actually enter a number when we are looking for a number. So let's look at this. The order in which the try except works, right? There's a while loop. It's always true. We go into the try. We try to read a number and convert it to an integer. If it fails, we go to except. If it works, we break out of the loop. This is one way to write this loop. So what is this actually doing? Let's take a look at it here. So I want to read an age, but I also want to make sure that while I read the age, I want to make sure they enter only numbers. So we start out by saying age equals -1, some kind of a value to start with, okay? Anything other than 0. Because we're going to use our 0 to get into the loop. While age not equal to 0, it's not equal to 0, it's equal to -1 here. We go in here, we try is a syntax, okay? We read age from them, we convert it to an int, we put it into age. It tries to do that. That's what it's doing. If it fails, meaning if they enter cat, then it's going to come to except and say invalid, not an integer, and it's going to go right back to line 4, the while loop. And it's going to try to read again. So as long as they enter cat or dog or A or B or whatever, it's going to come to except. The minute they enter a number, that could be any number, it doesn't have to be like within a reasonable age, could be 200. The minute they enter a number, we don't know that, right? It's going to come here to the if statement on line 7 and say if age is now, if they have entered an unreasonable number, that means either less than 0 or greater than 100, then we say this is unreasonable. And we say continue. What does continue do? Continue goes back to the loop, the while loop. Continue says ignore the rest of this and go right back to the while loop. So if they enter an unreasonable age, we output a message and we go right back and we try to read again. And if they enter a good number and if it is within range, then we come here and say break means break out of the loop. And it says you enter this age. So this is a good data validation loop to see if the user entered the right number. First of all, if they entered a number and if they entered the right number. So that's what that data validation is talking about. Then you have a couple of other things you can do. Division by 0, for example, when you're trying to find the sum of numbers, right? Count, when you're trying to find the average of something, sum divided by count. If count is 0, you shouldn't divide. Otherwise, you get a division by 0 error. So before you do average, you would check if count is greater than 0, then you should do the average. Okay, so those are all the different types of data validation that we could do.